Welcome to the 2015 Candidates Forum, sponsored by the Wallingford Community Women. I'm Jean McFarland, the moderator for this program. This segment features the candidates running for mayor. The format will be as follows. The first part of the program will consist of questions asked of the candidates by members of the local media, including the New Haven Register and the Record Journal, and students from Mark T. Sheehan High School. The second part will allow each candidate to make a closing statement. During the question and answer portion of the program, each candidate will have 3 minutes to respond to a question. The opposing candidate will be allowed 1 minute for rebuttal. To conclude the program, each candidate will have 3 minutes to make closing remarks. Prior to the program, a flip of the coin determined the order of questioning. Before beginning the questioning, I'd like to introduce the candidates running for mayor. They are William Dickinson, Republican, Donald Robert Kennedy, petitioning. Eric Vo, would you please ask your first question of Donald Kennedy?
Hi, Mr. Kennedy. So you talked extensively about the need for more technology to increase efficiencies in town hall. 2 years ago at a forum, the mayor had mentioned how adding email to town hall and to department heads would possibly create the need to hire someone else to go through the emails just to see if anything was important. Do you initially plan on adding any administrative positions to implement your plans?
Let me try to phrase it this way. Email is just one piece of the technology that I was talking about. In fact, I wasn't even talking about technology. I was talking more about re-engineering. And re-engineering is process improvement. And process improvement means that you have to look at every department, every group, and look at what they're currently doing, how they're doing it. If one of the items they require is email, then yes, we would definitely look at email. In terms of adding staff, one of my first goals is to actually look at the number of people we have working for the town, which I believe right now is sitting at around 300. And how do we reduce that staff so that we can replace it with different skill sets in that staff, like the technology people you're referring to. We have to look at the whole picture. We just can't look and say it's email or it's payment processing or it's this or it's that. It's the entire picture that has to be looked at. So will we be adding staff to, as you say, review the emails, check it out, make sure the security is there, especially for the freedom of information requests. We have to make sure that everything is tracked and everything is kept. So yes, we will be adding staff, but not augmenting the total number of staff. We can do the technology transition, but we will do it in a way that we will not augment the 300 FTEs, because one of my goals is to cut staff. I've been mentioning that all along. One of my goals is to basically reduce the number of full-time equivalents. Excuse me, that's a technical term for people. And reduce the number of full-time equivalents so that we free up money to cover the technology costs.
Emily Franke, would you please ask the question of William Dickinson?
Hi, Mr. Dickinson. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. So my question is, what are you going to do to encourage young people to register to vote?
Well, I think obviously participation in democracy is very important, and I think much of that depends upon the examples elected officials provide. Is it something that is important in the lives of the community? And the example each elected official sets helps people to either understand or turn off from government. So part of it is a personal mission to be as approachable and as understandable as possible so that everyone in the community can understand what is happening. Certainly having programs, attending programs that are of interest to young people and encourage them to be involved by listening to how government impacts their lives. I think with the new effort within the school system to contact and provide curriculum that responds to the needs of business, there perhaps can be a corner of that that also deals with government through the civics classes. But a lot of it is just representing the community in a way that encourages people to believe that there is importance here, and local government especially affects everyone, the young and the old.
Thank you.
Haley Frankie, would you please ask a question of Donald Kennedy?
Hi, how are you? What are some more ways that you plan on addressing drug and alcohol abuse?
My favorite. One of the problems that we have in the schools, and I've talked to Sal about that, and I've talked to the police chief, and I've talked to a number of other people, is that there are drugs in the schools, and the town is in denial. Like when you talk to various people, everybody says, "Oh, there's really not a problem." Well, contrary to popular belief, there is a problem. And one of the first things I would do is I would fund a canine unit, and that we would immediately go and do some random searches of drugs and walk through the schools and try to pick up the drugs everywhere they are. The second part that I think is really important, and I think the Coalition for Wallingford is one of the groups that is working and trying to educate the students. One of the things as a senior student is you have to do community service. One of the things I believe that you should do is that there should be groups to talk about drug awareness and talk about amongst yourself, and maybe with a therapist there to guide you along, to help you to understand what can we do to not get involved with drugs. I mean, that's so important because you're our future, and if you mess it up at the beginning, we're in trouble. So yes, canine unit, use your community service hours to do drug, get together, talk about drugs, and possibly, and I don't know, and again, this is a Board of Education issue, how do you augment the information in the schools to talk about the dangers of drugs? And again, we have to do that. One of the interesting things is that I heard from Sal was that his concern was what happens if we have the dogs and we push the drugs out of the schools. And I asked the chief, I says, "Well, what do you do?" And he says, "Boy, we're going to tackle it." So, we've got both sides covered.
I'll speak to that under the rebuttal time. I don't think it's swept under a rug. We have had Red Ribbon Week for years. There's a very active program in the Youth and Social Services. There's a Mayor's Council on Substance Abuse. There's now the Coalition for Better Wallingford. They have planned programs in which everyone has been invited and is involved. Police officers have attended programs and announced what it is that they see and how we need to respond to these issues. So there are active programs. I don't think the police department is as much on the education side as on the enforcement, and certainly we're ready to enforce. But enforcement means you've already lost some of the battle. We need to be ahead of that and make sure that our young people stay away from the bad decisions. The DARE program that used to be in the schools was a big part of that.
Thank you.
Luther Trammell, would you please ask the next question of William Dickinson?
Mayor Dickinson, your administration was criticized in some circles for not knowing in advance about the departure of Bristol-Myers Squibb from town. What kind of new approach can the town take in terms of marketing itself to businesses and in retaining the businesses that are already here?
Well, the departure of Bristol-Myers is, of course, a significant concern. I don't think there's a way for us to infuse ourselves within the private circles of private business and be made aware of their plans, but we do have an active program for retention of existing business and making other businesses aware of a good place to relocate in Wallingford. The Economic Development Commission is doing an incredibly good job of seeing how best to market the community. We've been in touch with Bristol Myers. We're hoping to be able to market that property with Bristol Myers for other uses, including perhaps a continued use by the 500 or so employees that will remain within the state. So a lot has to happen, but we have incentive programs. We have an outreach program where we visit companies. Today I visited a company that's one of the Fortune 500 companies, Amphenol, right here in town. We have Edible Arrangements on the other side, not a manufacturer. They're the world headquarters for Edible Arrangements. Amphenol is a world headquarters for their business, coaxial and other types of cables. So a lot of work is being performed to be in touch with the business community and make sure that Wallingford is a place to relocate.
I think one of the big concerns that I have with the closing down of that facility is the families that will leave, and everybody tells me, well, don't worry, they don't live here. Well, I think that some people do live here, and when they are transferred to, some of the, to either Massachusetts or California or whatever, that's going to leave a hole. So we don't only lose the business, but we also lose the residents. And when you lose residents that are making, in the $100,000 range, because the scientists that are at Bristol Myers are very highly paid scientists, we're going to lose a lot of revenue, and we have to really start thinking of how are we going to tackle that problem. So yes, I agree there is a business issue, but there's also a human issue, because we're going to lose a lot of very wealthy families who are going to leave our town.
Emily, would you please ask the next question of Mr. Kennedy?
Hi. What do you feel is the biggest responsibility as mayor?
Smile.
True.
One of the areas that the mayor, in my opinion, has so many different areas he has to work with, and pleasing the people is one of them. But one of the things that I would be concerned, or I will be concerned with as mayor, is to make sure that this town is run as efficiently as it can, so that we don't overtax residents and we don't overtax businesses. And one of the things that I find in Wallingford is that, and again, you have to know a little bit of my background, is I've only been here 4 years, unlike all of the people that were on the panel before me who've been here 20, 40, 50, 60 years. I've only been here 4 years. And I've lived in some very major cities and towns in the world. I grew up in Montreal, I lived in Toronto, I lived in Atlanta, I worked in Amsterdam, I worked in Paris, I worked in DC, I worked all over the world. And one of the things that you always have to do when you run a town is you have to take care of the residents and the businesses. And I think we haven't done a very good job of taking care of the residents, because we keep raising the taxes over and over again. So one of the things that I'm concerned with is, how am I going to mentor the staff? I've heard all kinds of comments tonight about firing people. No, we don't fire people. We mentor people into thinking differently and producing differently, so that we can actually change the way the town does business. And then we have 50, again, I'm going to use that term, full-time equivalents, that are going to retire, are eligible for retiring today, and another 50 in the next 5 years, 55 in the next 5 years. So we can switch over some of our people, some of our employees, and upgrade them for more technically competent people, and do changes like that. So the mayor has to worry about the people and about the businesses. And one of my biggest things is to make sure that we make it affordable to live here.
Thank you.
Lots of jobs.
My thought on this is that there are four primary areas of concern as mayor. One is the chief executive officer of the town. A second is kind of a lobbyist for the town before state or federal agencies. A third is the symbolic head of the town on ceremonial occasions to speak for the community. And fourth, ombudsman, which is a link between a citizen and a department where there's a dispute and try to resolve what the difference might be. Of the four, as chief executive officer, by far the budget is the most important job. It defines what services will be performed and ultimately the continuity of those services, how affordable they are and how long they will last depending upon how you deal with the monetary side of the community. So by far the most important is budget making, and that's the chief executive officer.
Haley, would you please ask the next question of Mr. Dickinson?
Hello. How will you modernize Wallingford in terms of technology?
Well, that always gets discussed a lot. Wallingford has a lot of technology. We just recently spent $500,000 to upgrade the software and the hardware in the police cruisers in order to provide for the video recordings and the information they give and receive from the cruisers. We just not too many years ago spent $1.2 million on our financial package that allows for billing, it allows receipt of revenue, it handles all of the financial information. This year's budget has approximately $1.2 million in it for technology, either new or maintenance or existing needs. We spent over $200,000 on the outage management system for the electric division. They felt that that would really help them in times of emergency. I hope it does, to the tune of the money involved. It's extremely expensive, and you have to be very careful. Technology is a great tool, but if you're not careful, the money is too easily spent and you never see the result. In all my time in office, which is at least 14 years, just kidding, I have never once seen savings from technology. Technology gives you greater capability in many ways, but it doesn't replace the labor. Labor is essential. The truck driver, the firefighter, the police officer, the teacher in the classroom. Most of our services are intensive labor efforts, and that's where you have to be careful. You're not going to replace too much of that without affecting service. You need those people to do that. If technology money replaces our ability to have those people providing service, we really haven't done what we should for the community. So it's a balance, but we have a lot of technology, and just about every department has email capability.
I probably need 25 minutes to answer this, but I won't. What the mayor just described, and I agree with him totally, is what we call the back office. What he's describing is all of the technology that the town has in the back office. Sadly, the back office is not seen by users, the user being the resident, the taxpayer. There's no email, there's no voicemail. I mean, there's still no voicemail in this town. There is limited front office technology, and front office technology is what the taxpayer would see on a day-to-day basis. A good example is I was talking to the chief, and I told him that I reported a damaged sign on a street that was leaning, and if you'd walk into it, you could hit your head. And I said, I reported it a month ago, and it's still leaning. And I asked him, I says, how does it work? And he says, when you call in, you give it to the desk person writes it down, gives it to somebody else, writes it down, gives it to somebody else. And I says, well, that's the problem. There's no technology, because what you do is
Okay, Mr. Kennedy.
let me just finish this one sentence. what you do is you're stuck with the manual transmission of information, and that's where mistakes happen.
Luther, would you please ask the next question of Mr. Kennedy?
Mr. Kennedy, a little earlier you'd said that the town has 50 full-time equivalent individuals that would be eligible to retire within a year. Is that correct?
Today.
Today, okay. I'd like to know how you would go about doing that. I mean, the words fire have been bandied around. There's been a lot of discussion, but let's just say hypothetically that none of those 50 wanted to retire right now. How would you incentivize them to make it worth their while to retire?
I remember about 30 years ago, 40 years ago, I was working with a government agency, and I remember another consultant coming up to me and saying, you know, the best thing that we could do is we could take all of these civil servants and send them home. And if we did that, they'd stop spending money. And I thought about that, and I said, well, what's he talking about? And I said, well, yeah, that does make sense, because when you have a civil servant at a front desk or at any type of a position, they find ways to spend money. So when I say I'm going to incentivize people, I would like to, and I'm not going to promise this tonight because I have to study the figures, but give them a year's salary and say, if you leave today and you're qualified, for retirement and that, we'll give you a year's salary, year benefits, and go away and stay home for a year, and we'll pay you. And I think that would be very attractive to many of the employees. And there are some employees that will never go for any type of an incentive package. But we're not trying to retire 50 people or 100 people. We're trying to retire probably 20 or 30 people. And as time goes by, if we go 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, we probably want to go as many as 40 or 50 people. So I'm not talking about tomorrow coming in and getting rid of 20 people or 30 people. That's not the case. We're going to do it in stages. We're going to bring the technology in that will replace these positions. And the positions I'm looking at replacing are not the police. We're not going to touch any of the public safety. We're not going to touch any of the fire. Most of the social services will be the same or be augmented. What we need to replace is all of the administrative positions. We have so many clerks in this town, and as a result of that, we need to shrink that. We need to basically bring that down to where we can manage it. And the mayor says technology is expensive. I wrote a little note to myself before coming here tonight. We would spend $15 million a year on benefits and pensions. $15 million a year go out the door on benefits and pensions. And one of the counselors to be earlier said that the cost of the benefits is the one that's going to kill us. And that person's right. And one of the ways to get that under control is to get rid of the administrative type positions, eliminate some of these benefit costs, and that alone will pay for technology.
Well, I think the difficulty with eliminating a lot of positions in the offices is that my belief is when a person calls government, they deserve to have someone answer the phone. Very often when people call government, they have a problem, and it's not typical, it's unique to them. They need and want to talk to someone, not receive a recording and wonder if anyone's ever going to get it. I don't know if people call the state of Connecticut. I do. I call businesses, and at times it is very frustrating when all you get is a recording and you don't know what is happening, if anything is ever going to happen on the other end of the line. So I really believe at the local level, someone needs to answer the phone and be available.
Eric, would you please ask Mr. Dickinson the next question?
Hi, Mr. Mayor. I kind of want to just follow up to what you just said about offering your desire to offer that personal touch for the residents if they call into departments or just anywhere really. in terms of town hall, but you also talked about earlier how email access is pretty much, each department has email access now. So I'm curious to hear what was the change, because 2 years ago you seemed a little bit against it, so what changed from then, and moving forward, what kind of technology do you think can be put into town hall?
Well, it's not the primary access. The primary access is telephone. I mean, when you think about it, we have 24-hour emergency service response. 24 hours a day, you're going to get someone to talk to if it's a utility emergency or police or fire, an emergency of those kinds. You're obviously not going to replace that. Otherwise, someone's going to answer the phone during business hours, and that's our primary focus. At the point you emphasize email, the email is coming in all kinds of hours. Is that really necessary when it's a non-emergency? It just means that someone's got to get in touch, find out, is that what you meant? What did you mean? You can have 10 emails back and forth that one conversation would have solved. So in terms of efficiency, I'm not sure it's efficient at all, and I think it's a reassurance to people when they talk to someone that, yes, government works for me. Someone is there to talk to me in my hour of need. So I really haven't changed a lot. Mainly, it's because state government and federal government wants everything done remotely, which would be emails. So in order to accommodate that, you have to adapt to it. But is that good? I question it, obviously, because I think there's a significant lack of response from the higher levels of government. And they can get away with it because they aren't right next to living in the same community as local government. We live in the same community, and I think we need to be accessible.
About 2 months ago, I contacted one of the departments to set up an appointment to meet with the department head. And the first call was not answered at all. The second call was not answered at all. The third call was answered, and I said, finally, somebody to talk to. And they turned around and they said, I was sick and tired of listening to the phone ring, so I answered it. No, I can't help you. Can you call back later? And that's the type of service we're getting out of City Hall right now, the town hall, I should say. I think we need to have a voicemail system and leave a voicemail and then have our employees follow through within an acceptable time frame. We cannot just have voicemails that are not answered. And we cannot have phones that are not answered. Right now we have phones that are not answered.
Haley, excuse me, would you please ask the next question of Mr. Kennedy?
How will you determine what residential streets are plowed first in the winter? Or how do you?
Fine. No, that's not a good answer. I think the way and again, I'll leave that to the experts in public works because I'm not a public works expert. But the way streets need to be plowed is for the emergency services. I mean, you really have to think of the ambulances, the fire department, and the police. And we really need to get public safety priority. And I remember a few years ago when we had that 38 inches or whatever of snow, and I live off of Quinnipiac, which is en route for the fire department. And I remember seeing the fire truck coming down and getting bogged down, and then having a big payloader from the town public works coming and helping. And so public works has to work with public safety and determine exactly where do we need to get, where do we need the priorities. And if we ever have another snowstorm like we had in the last 4 years, we've had 2 major ones, we have to have better equipment. One of my pet peeves with the town is we buy these Fords, these Ford police cruisers that if you have more than 8 or 9 inches of snow, they can't get anywhere. They're a lot better than what they used to be because they now are 4-wheel drive, but they're not SUVs. Why don't we have police SUVs? We know the fire trucks will get through because they're so big and heavy and strong, and they'll plow through everything, and the ambulances will get through. But the police won't be able to get through because their vehicles will bog down. So it's a good question because it encompasses a lot of different departments. The snow plowing, the emergency vehicles, and then, I hate to say this, but lastly, the residents, because people have to go to work. And again, thinking back a couple of years ago, it took, 3 days, 3.5 days to get our right-of-ways plowed so that our citizens, our neighbors could actually get out and get to work. And so we need to rely on a combined effort between the public safety and public works.
Yeah, I think that is a system that does work well. During the big storm, we had National Guard with some Humvees, and it took Humvees to generally, at times the ambulance couldn't get through. The Humvees had to be used, and then they were walking in neighborhoods to reach a home to be able to carry someone out to reach the ambulance. So in a 40-inch snowfall, there is no car that's going to be able to reach a desired destination. But in normal snowfalls, I think the four-wheel capability in the police cruisers is adequate, and we are looking to experiment with some other equipment in the public works to also address quicker removal of snow.
Luther, would you please ask the next question of Mr. Dickinson?
Mayor, you made the statement a little earlier that one of the jobs that the mayor has is to represent the community that he serves before state government. I wanted to ask you, can you give us 3 examples of ways that you have interacted with state officials that you felt have been effective and yielded results?
I'm not going to represent that it yielded results, but certainly I've been active on the MS4 permitting issue, where DEEP, Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, wants to impose significant new requirements for stormwater. Very costly in our estimation. Our initial estimates are it's potentially a $1 to $1.5 million operational cost per year. So we're working to have that reduced in the way of impact. I have testified with regard to the phosphorus issue, which will potentially cost the town $19 million to build phosphorus removal. I have also spoken on legislation such as liabilities for recreational use of property. When the town was due to a court case, not given exemption any longer. Previously, it had been exempt for ordinary negligence. It had to be gross negligence. So we inherited a new liability. So certainly active in advocating for grant money on a variety of projects, including the budget in general. So the success of these things is, I guess, open to interpretation. I think the voice has to be there. I understand at the state level they certainly can't provide everything we would like to have, but there are significant efforts every year. We have a meeting with the departments. We put together a legislative package, a booklet that contains all of our requests with regard to legislation and where we think we either need new laws or a change in old laws. That is given to our legislators, those who represent the town, and that's a guide for them to use as they go through the legislative session where the town stands. So we're very active in that regard to make sure that the state officials know that the town is concerned and has a position on many of these issues.
No comment.
Eric, would you please ask the next question of Donald Kennedy?
Mr. Kennedy, I want to follow up to something you said earlier when addressing the drug and alcohol problem or issue within the schools. And you talked about funding a K-9 unit and having drug searches, but I mean, how feasible is that given the staffing and the personnel numbers at the police department? I don't believe they're at full capacity, but, I mean, would you have to hire new officers? And, I mean, they're already a pretty busy department, so, I mean, how often are you talking about going into the schools and searching? And there's numerous schools in the town too, so.
Most of the, most of the communities that have K-9 units use the K-9 units for multiple reasons. And I guess your question centers more around the staffing than the K-9 unit itself. One of the things that I believe is that we need to add money to the fire department and the police department budgets, because that's what towns are all about, is to public safety. I mean, the towns have a tendency to expand into other areas and start doing all kinds of wonderful things, but the real reason for a town to exist is public safety. And while I know that the chief, both chiefs that I've talked to have said that they're satisfied with their budgets and all that, when I asked them if they could use more money, the answers came back very definitely, that they could use it. So a K-9 unit to me is very important to use in schools to make sure that we keep the drugs out of the schools. And that warrants funding that extra person, that vehicle, all of the pieces that go along with it. Funding itself is not something that is, first of all, my pledge is not to raise taxes. And I'm looking at a lot of different things I would like to do, and I will do, because we need them. So how do I fund those items without raising taxes? Again, goes back to my re-engineering. We have to put the horse before the cart. We basically have to re-engineer. We have to find places where we can be more efficient. And a lot of the re-engineering is process improvement. That doesn't mean getting rid of people. It's just getting a lot smarter. I mean, a lot of the things we do, we're just not very smart about. It takes us forever to do things. So we want to get smarter. We want to install automation wherever we can. And we want to, possibly outsource. And one of the examples I've used for outsourcing is payroll. I mean, we still do payroll. And when I asked the controller, I says, why do we do payroll? I mean, nobody does payroll anymore. And he says, well, we talked to ADP, but they told us our payroll system was too complex. And I said, why do you simplify it? I mean, it's so simple today to take things and to simplify them. So will we get the money? Yes, we will get the money. We will do things that we will free up funds, and we will give the fire department, because especially the fire department with the Yalesville situation, running out of volunteers. This has been going on for a couple of years now. They were at 120 volunteers. They're down to 53. And they need 4 volunteers to replace every full-time person. So, I mean, we've got to do something for public safety.
I just want to respond briefly. I don't think public safety is the most important service offered. I think public safety, education, certainly in Wallingford, the utilities, public works, depending upon your circumstance and what you need, any one of those is going to be your priority. They're all critical to the foundation of the community. Secondly, with regard to payroll and changes, most of that would have to be agreed to by the unions. We have 4 pay weeks, and typically we're paying people on a weekly basis. So there's 4 different pay weeks paid on a weekly basis. There probably is not another business the size of Wallingford with that kind of a situation, but that has to be negotiated with the union, because it would be a change in the work condition if you're going to a 2-week pay or making changes in when a person is going to be paid.
Emily, would you please ask the next question of Mr. Dickinson?
Yeah. What are your thoughts on acquiring additional properties for town open space?
Plans with regard to acquiring additional properties?
Yeah, for town open space.
Open space. I personally think open space is a very important facet of what we've been doing. It's more difficult now that the economy is really preventing the ability to fund purchases in a manner that we previously were able to accomplish. But we just recently purchased a property in the middle of the Tyler Mill area, which gives us almost a complete ownership of 900 acres of open space. And that is a real plus. That is, you can look at it as Wallingford Central Park. Picture New York City if it was never planned to have a Central Park in New York City. Someone had to say, this area has to remain unbuilt upon. You can build all around it, but you can't build in this area. Priceless. So as time goes on, 100 years from now, 200 years from now, we all expect Wallingford will be here, and people will be thankful to see a real green, natural area. But it takes planning today. So we still should be putting money aside as we are able and make that a priority. Not only is it good for the aesthetics, but in terms of the environment, it reduces the amount of impervious surface, which creates runoff. It reduces pollution in many sorts, and it also provides trees that provide the oxygen and take the carbon dioxide out of the air. So open space is important to keep our eye on the heritage of the community and remember that it was a rural community at one time, and that's a great reminder of it.
I'm going to differ from the mayor in the sense that I agree that we need some open space, but I also think that the town owns a huge amount of land. And imagine if we could take a section of land and trade it or give it to a developer to build over 55 housing, that we could actually come up and the community lake area by the senior center, that whole area, and look at it and plan and say, hey, developer, if we give you this land, can you build 100 units or 200 units or whatever for over 55 housing, affordable units. So I think we need to look at the land we own, where it can be turned long-term into parks or whatever, but also look at the excess land we own and possibly use it for, attracting more citizens to our town, more taxpayers, and working with developers and making that.
Luther, excuse me, would you please ask the next question of Mr. Kennedy?
Mr. Kennedy, your business is re-engineering the way companies do business. With that in mind, how would you go about re-engineering how Wallingford markets itself to attract businesses to the community?
Oh, that's an easy one. We have so many ordinances and laws and bylaws and rules and regulations that we chase businesses away. And I think what we need to do is we need to actually look at everything that's on the books and figure out, is there anything that's business unfriendly? I'm not saying we want to destroy what we have, because that's not what we want to do. We want to make Wallingford as attractive as possible to new business. Connecticut is one of the worst states in the union in terms of attracting business right now. It's one of the most highly taxed states, and that makes us a victim. That basically puts us in a very sad situation. Because we're fighting the Connecticut image, we're at a disadvantage. And what can we do to make Wallingford more attractive to business? And I think if we tweak and change a little ordinance here, an ordinance there, a bylaw, a law, and we control our taxes, we manage it, bring some of the costs down, we're going to start looking attractive again. And that's one of the key reasons that I'm running against the mayor, is because I am so frustrated with the taxation that goes on in this town, and so frustrated with the cost of living. And when I talk to businesses and they tell me about all of the issues with signs, with blight. I mean, I talked to one business person today that said the police was knocking at his door saying he had to clean up because of the blight regulations. This is business. These are the people that employ our residents. These are the people we have to learn to work with. We have to change and try to make it more attractive for more of them to show up.
Well, there are always ordinances that can be amended or altered, but most of our rules really come out of state law. The land use requirements for wetlands, for planning and zoning, the authority of planning and zoning to have and adopt certain regulations, that all is backed by the state of Connecticut. I think Wallingford's greatest attribute is, frankly, our electric rates. The electric division places us in a position unlike any other community in the state. We have the lowest electric rates in Connecticut. And for any large business, energy costs are extremely important. The dependability, the reliability of that electric supply is again, it's priceless, but they enjoy having a lower rate. So that's in terms of business attractiveness, our location is good in the state. I believe our taxes are reasonable.
Thank you. Eric, would you please ask the next question of Mr. Dickinson?
Mr. Mayor, area municipal leaders like the city manager in Meriden had mentioned that to address the governor's cuts that he announced, I believe last month now, it wasn't going to impact their city too much and that they were just going to take a comprehensive approach in terms of managing their budget. I mean, do you think, I don't know if saying jumping the gun is a right term, but do you think alternatives could have been taken or looked at before announcing the reductions that you announced?
Well, I believe it's important to be honest with the public. You know, every dollar determines whether the budget balances or not. And $233,000 to me is a significant amount of money. My real fear is there will be other reductions. So if we don't pay attention to the 233 and then it becomes 750 and we're approaching $1 million, I would rather begin dealing with that now, inform people, you know, we can't do everything we want to do if we are not going to receive the money promised by the state of Connecticut. And it really troubles me that the state now is saying, well, we'll budget, but we have a lapse clause. So that if we don't quite have as much money as we thought we were going to have, we can lapse certain funds that you should receive. Well, we can't budget that way, or typically don't. And I think, I can't speak for other communities, but I think being honest with the public is that every dollar counts. And I would rather inform the public that we're worried. We have real concerns about the future, and we're going to say now, we're not going to spend everything that we said we would spend in order to see what happens as this stormy weather develops in a financial sense.
We have $19.9 million in unassigned cash sitting in the bank. We only need $12 million to maintain our bond ratings, their AAA bond ratings. Why don't we use a little bit of that money? Why don't we, the fuel budget this year is something that I looked at and I'm shaking, because the fuel went from, if the price of gasoline, diesel, et cetera, went from $4 a gallon down to $2.50 a gallon, but yet we didn't adjust the budgets accordingly. We adjusted the budgets as compared to last year's budget. We didn't adjust the budget as compared to 2 years ago actual budget, because if we compare the current budget to the actual budget in fuel, we haven't budgeted a penny, but yet the gas dropped 40%. We could have at least dropped 25%. So I think this is foolish to cut this money out right now, because we have so much money sitting in the budget, sitting in different accounts that we could use, and we wouldn't have to cut a fire engine or anything like that, or any other item.
Emily, would you ask the next question of Mr. Kennedy?
Yeah, my last question is, what do you propose to do to promote the new train station and improve traffic flow?
I lived in Toronto, I'm trying to think now, 14 years, and Toronto has one of the best public transit systems in the world. Not as good as Europe. I mean, I spent a couple of years in Amsterdam, and everybody uses bicycles, which I don't think is very reasonable here because of the snow and that. But when I think of Toronto, what they did is they built a public transit system that was commuter friendly. They had huge parking lots, bicycle racks, bus systems to take the people from the different areas within the community and to bring them to their trains. And by managing and by giving free parking, all the parking is free. So by giving free parking, they encouraged those who wanted to drive, and they also encouraged people who would carpool, because again, if you carpooled, you had a spot closer to the tracks or to the station. So how do you manage it? You plan to have a friendly service. A friendly service is easy to park, easy to get to, easy to bike to, any and all of the ways to encourage people to get there and to get back home afterwards safely. Safety is a very important issue. So how do you manage the traffic? It all has to be part of that major plan. If I have parking for 500 vehicles, then I have to accommodate 500 vehicles. If I don't have parking for 500 vehicles, do I have a bus system that'll take the people, because you don't want to run empty trains. You want to run trains with people in them. And Toronto has one of the most successful ones because they made the environment around the tracks or around the train station extremely friendly.
The state of Connecticut will be running the train, so we won't have much authority over that. But currently, the Plan of Conservation and Development is under discussion with Planning and Zoning, and public meetings are being held, and we will be looking at transit-oriented development. We have 2 consultants who will be providing information to the town regarding what land use should be allowed in and around the train station area, and for the downtown in general, what changes can be made in order to encourage private development and continue making it a viable place of great vitality. So the Conservation Plan of Development and the efforts on that are really critical to our success in transitioning for the train station.
Haley, would you please ask the last question of Mr. Dickinson?
What are your thoughts on the linear trail now and its possible expansion?
Well, the linear trail is a wonderful asset to the community. It really allows people to enjoy the out of doors and appreciate the Quinnipiac River. I think we've been very fortunate in receiving significant money from the state of Connecticut and federal government for development of the trail. I think the current phase is something like $3 million, which will provide a bridge onto Fireworks Island and bring us from the tunnel to Fireworks Island in Yalesville. Future pieces of the trail will depend upon funding being made available from, again, state or federal government, and whether they will have the funds is an open question, because clearly, given the other needs that we're all aware of, those funds may not be in an amount that would allow us to do much in the way of rapid development of future portions of the trail. But, you know, we keep that goal in mind with patience. Hopefully it will be extended through Wallingford up to Meriden and ultimately south to North Haven. But the town is not in a position to be able to fund those additions at this point.
And I told the mayor that I would agree with him, and on this one I agree with him.
Okay, thank you, everyone. That concludes the question and answer portion of the program. Each candidate will now have 3 minutes to make a closing statement. Mr. Kennedy, will you please begin?
Not a lot of people know me in this town because I've only been here for 4 years. And what I do bring to the town is a wealth of experience that is probably very hard to match. I've been working in process improvement for the last 20 years, and I've worked in all parts of the world. I've worked in India, I've worked in Europe, I worked in Canada, and I've worked here in the U.S. I've worked with the U.S. Army. I've worked with UPS, AT&T, all kinds of very large corporations and actual individuals. I've been married for 47 years, which seemed like it was yesterday when I first got married. And, you know, I have a daughter that I'm very proud of. She's a graduate of Columbia, and she worked her way into Yale and did a fellowship, and then now she's a acting director in DMAS for the state of Connecticut installing lean. And for those of you who don't know what lean is basically another level of process improvement where she is working to try to get their organization smarter, more efficient. What I can do for this town is simple, is I can bring some experience to look at all of the processes, and I talk technically, and I don't want to. I want to talk more like a mayor who will say, well, we'll look at what Mary does or Jim does, but we're going to look at the processes. We're going to try to figure out what can be done smoother, easier, more efficiently. How can we save money? Can we implement automation? Now, there's not automation. Automation isn't the answer to everything. So contrary to what people say, automation is just one piece. Process improvement, automation, and possibly outsourcing. The example I used was payroll processing. We could outsource to an ADP or to a similar thing. We can outsource payment processing to a bank or another financial institution. We are giving 66% of our tax money to the civil servants in this town. The pension plan and the benefits take up $15 million a year. We have to start working at reducing that. The state's not going to help us because the state's in trouble also. So we have to do it ourselves. And the way to do it is to basically go in, look at all the processes, cut where we can, and start shrinking our workforce so that we can hold our taxes and eventually reduce our taxes. And one of my fans back there basically said, think of different ways of capitalizing when you spend money. There's a lot of different ways to spend the money intelligently, and we're going to do that. We're going to actually take our time and do it intelligently. Thank you.
Wallingford's a wonderful community, and it's wonderful because of the many people who participate in very identifiable ways. The dog park. The dog park is basically a group of volunteers who decided, you know, it'd be nice to have a dog park. And yes, the town assisted, but primarily they're the ones who obtained the funding, and now it's a reality. The observance of the prayer for peace, where an ecumenical service was held, and the church was full. I mean, there's a generosity and a spirit in this community that is wonderful. We want to nurture that. We also have to make decisions for the future with full knowledge of what's happening around us. You know, there's a story about a captain who's dead ahead in the dark of night, saw a light right on his course. So he radioed, 10 degrees west, steer 10 degrees west. He got a message back, you steer 10 degrees east. He said, I am a captain of a United States Navy ship. You change your course 10 degrees west. Message came back, I am a seaman second class. You change your course 10 degrees east. Captain said, I am a battleship. Change your course. The message came back, I am a lighthouse. Your call. Know what you face, because everything doesn't have the same answer. We're going to be facing a Cadillac tax on the Affordable Care. We're going to be facing MS4 new regulations. We're going to be facing phosphorus and any number of new mandates, and all in a circumstance where Connecticut, as a state, lost 26,000 people as of the, I believe, the census in 2010, and last year lost another 1,600 people in New Haven County. Changing times. There are things in our future we had better pay attention to because they're not going to go back the way they used to be unless serious change is made to some basic elements. So with all of us working together, we can do that, but we've got to keep our eye on the future.
Thank you. This concludes the mayoral segment of the 2015 Candidates Forum. On behalf of the Wallingford Community Women, I thank you for watching and remind you to please vote on November 3rd.